At hour 6, the coherence score was still 1. I checked the instrument 3 times. I pulled the calibration log. I ran a null field test, an empty chamber, no subject, no input stream, and the instrument returned the expected baseline of 0. I put the subject back in the read window, and the number returned to exactly what it had been since the first hour of the session, 1.00, maximum coherence, the instrument's ceiling. I sat with that for a moment and then sent the anomaly flag to my supervisor. Privith Sonvel arrived at the monitoring station 11 minutes later, read the display, and said nothing for a long time. I should explain what a coherence score measures because it matters. The Continuance Cognitive Assessment Suite uses a 7-axis model of selfhood, spatial orientation, temporal continuity, body boundary integrity, social frame memory, language anchor stability, emotional valence baseline, and what the instrument architects call the core identity thread, the deepest layer, the one that tells a mind it is the same mind it was an hour ago. Under dissolution conditions, those 7 axes degrade in a predictable order. Spatial orientation goes first. Temporal continuity follows within the hour. By hour 4 in a standard session, even the most psychologically robust subjects among our 317 catalog species show a core identity thread score below 0.4. The instrument's upper range, 1.00, had never been recorded from a live subject in 43 years of continuance assessments. It was a theoretical ceiling, included in the architecture because the mathematics required a boundary, not because anyone expected to reach it. Survey Coordinator Reston had been in dissolution chamber 7 for 6 hours, and his coherence score had not moved. Run the environment to maximum, Privith Sonvel said. I hesitated. Maximum dissolution is reserved for critical intelligence extraction. The environmental replacement engine discards not just visual and auditory input, but gravitational direction, thermal continuity, time interval consistency, and what subjects subjectively describe as the felt weight of their own body. It produces complete disorientation in our most resilient assessed subjects, Sareth analysts, Korathi command cast, even the rare Vithari specialists who train for cognitive resistance, within 90 minutes. In 43 years, no subject had remained coherent past the 4-hour maximum dissolution threshold. The continuance had therefore never needed to run it longer. I ran it to maximum. Privith Sonvel called in the 2 instrument architects. Sareth Velkan arrived first, reviewed the calibration logs without speaking, and positioned herself at the secondary monitoring station. Oreth Privithan came in behind her, took one look at the display, and immediately requested access to the cross-species coherence archive. We gave it to him. Inside the chamber, the environment was now completely synthetic. Every photon reaching Reston's eyes was generated. Every sound or the absence of sound was generated. The temperature, the air pressure on his skin, the faint proprioceptive signal that tells a body which way is down, all replaced, all algorithmically hostile, set to maximum incoherence. The protocol is designed to leave a subject with nothing to anchor to. No reference point. No surface they can trust. No sensory signal confirming they are real. In theoretical terms, it removes the outside world entirely and leaves the subject alone with only their own mind to inhabit. Sareth Velkan brought in a second instrument, a Sareth 9 array, independently calibrated, different manufacturer, different 7-axis model. She configured it, synced it to Reston's biometric ID, and ran it alongside mine. The second instrument returned 1.00. Oreth Privithan asked me quietly whether the subject was conscious. I told him yes. Biometric feeds showed normal waking brain activity, normal arousal, normal sensory processing signatures. He was awake. He was inside a room that had erased everything real, and he was awake, and his coherence score was the highest number the instrument could print. I remember Oreth Privithan standing at my station for a long moment, looking at the 2 displays side by side, both reading 1. He exhaled through his secondary vents, a Varethi reflex, involuntary, the kind that happens when the body understands something the mind is still refusing. Then he said, "Run the archive." Orath Privatsan finished the archive search at hour 8 and stood up from his station. He did not say what it had found. He did not need to. His posture said it. He crossed to the primary display, looked at the number 1 final time and said, "There is no precedent in the archive for a coherent reading past hour 4 under maximum conditions. The archive contains 317 species." 317, Privath Sonvel repeated. "In 43 years of assessments." Nobody said anything after that. The instruments continued reading. At hour 10, the absolute protocol limit, the boundary past which we could not legally extend the session under continuance intake regulation, I began the shutdown sequence. The environmental replacement engine wound down. One by one, real inputs were restored. Light, then sound, then gravity, then temperature. I watched the biometric feed as Reston's autonomic indicators settled. Heart rate, steady. Respiratory cycle, even. Cortisol and its Terran analogs, baseline. The coherence score as the session ended was 1.00. I opened the chamber door myself. Reston was sitting on the floor in the center of the room, not collapsed, not hunched, sitting cross-legged, his hands loose in his lap, his head slightly bowed. He looked up when the light came on. His eyes tracked normally. He blinked twice. "Done," he said. His voice was level, not flat in the way a voice goes flat when a person is dissociated or suppressing something. Level in the way a voice is level when a person has simply been waiting, and the waiting is now over. Privath Sonvel conducted the post-session interview herself. I stood at the back of the room and watched. She walked him through the standard protocol: temporal orientation questions, spatial frame checks, social memory anchors. He answered each one correctly, without hesitation, without the slight lag that even subjects who have maintained partial coherence typically show after extended dissolution exposure. Then Privath Sonvel stepped off the protocol and asked the question that was not in the instrument manual. "What did you anchor to?" she said. "In there, when everything was removed, what held?" Reston thought about it, not for long, 2, perhaps 3 seconds. "Nothing held," he said. "There wasn't anything to hold. The room did whatever the room did. I just stayed myself. I'm not sure there was another option." Privath Sonvel wrote that down. She wrote it down carefully, the way you write down something you are going to read again. The debrief concluded. Reston was escorted to intake holding, and the 4 of us convened at the monitoring station. Orath Privatsan had already begun drafting the instrument addendum. Sareth Velkan was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "The instrument is not wrong. It measured something. It simply did not have a category for what it measured." She was right. The 7-axis model had been designed to track the degradation of selfhood under conditions that make selfhood untenable. It had no architecture for a selfhood that did not degrade. It had no bucket for coherence that was not contingent on any external reference point at all, for an identity that was not constructed from inputs, did not require them, and did not notice their absence. The new classification was filed that evening. Privath Sonvel designated it baseline coherence independence, grade absolute, meaning the subject's identity model requires no environmental scaffolding and shows no detectable upper stress threshold within the assessment instrument's operational range. Grade absolute is a designation we invented that night. There was no prior grade to assign. I drafted the advisory to the Continuance Intake Board. I recommended that dissolution-based assessment protocols be suspended pending methodology review for all human subjects, on the grounds that the instrument as designed returns only a ceiling value, and therefore provides no actionable intelligence. I recommended that a new theoretical framework be developed before further sessions were attempted. What I could not put in the advisory, what belongs to no filing category the Continuance maintains, is the thing that stayed with me after I left the monitoring station. It was not the score, not the archive returning no precedence across 317 species in 43 years, not even Reston's answer, though I have thought about that answer more than I expected to. It was the 10 hours before the answer. The 10 hours in which everything we could remove was removed, and the number on the instrument did not move, and there was no mechanism by which it could have stayed where it was, and it stayed there anyway. A mind is supposed to need something to hold to. Every model we have built, across every species we have assessed, rests on that premise. The self is a structure maintained by its contact with reality. Remove reality and the structure weakens. Remove enough of it and the structure fails. Reston's structure did not fail. I still don't have a good word for what it did instead.